is James Heappey, who until last month was the Armed Forces Minister. Great to have you here in the studio this evening.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. So Rishi Sunak's pledged to raise defence spending to 2.5% of GDP by 2030. You must be pretty pleased. That's what you're calling for.
Yeah, I am. I mean, to be clear and to get the punch in first, I'd been saying that we should go further, and I think over the next decade or so there is a conversation about that. But I think it'd be really churlish on a night when we're reflecting on the biggest increase in defence spending that a government has made in my lifetime. £75 billion additional onto the MOD's budget in the rest of this decade, and at the expense of other things. And in an election year, a Prime Minister will more naturally move towards, he could have announced a 40 billion on hospitals, 20 billion on schools, 15 billion on roads, or 75 billion on tax cuts. And instead, he's gone to Poland, stood in front of our armed forces and said he's going to spend that 75 billion on defence. I think that's a sign of the times that we're living in, but also a reflection of his priorities for the country.
So just to be clear, you think we need, what, more, sooner?
Well, look, I think what 2.5% will do, and it is urgently needed, and that's why this announcement is unreservedly welcome, celebrated, and the way people in the MOD...
Yeah, we've got that.
Very
welcome it.
What 2.5 will do is allow the current armed forces, the Army, Navy, Air Force, at its current size, to be correctly enabled, i.e. the kind of engineers, the medics, the logistics, to have the stockpiles, to put our defence industrial base onto a sort of permanent manufacturing scale that underpins our kind of strategic resilience and our ability to supply the force in war. So all of that is fantastic. Anybody who thinks that 2.5% is going to bring with it a growth in the Navy or a growth in the Air Force or a growth in the Army doesn't really understand just how expensive all this stuff is. And in time, I can see the need to have that conversation. But it would be so churlish. I think deeply, sometimes in politics, it's so easy to just tear everything down, demand more, this isn't good enough, or sort of... this is one of those days where the Prime Minister phoned me first thing this morning before he went to Poland, and he told me what he was going to do, and I was genuinely gobsmacked. I didn't think, if I'm honest, in an election year, defence would end up being the priority, and it is, and that's fantastic. That's the correct decision.
As you admit yourself, it's quite expensive, right?
Hugely.
The defence spending. £75 billion spending commitment. And to put that into context, the entire annual schools budget is £60 billion. I don't understand how this is going to be funded. Have you just found the money down the back of a sofa? Has it?
No, I mean, and look, the conversation I had with the PM this morning was too brief for me to authoritatively relay to you how he's doing it. But what he mentioned to me was the proceeds of a series of efficiency measures that have been taken thus far and that would be taken over the course of the next Parliament, none of which I think sounds unpainful, but reflects...
efficiency measures sound... Well, that sounds great. That sounds like, cutting back on a bit of photocopying in the Cabinet Office.
No. I suspect much more profound.
Austerity.
Well, I know I wouldn't want to go that far.
£75 billion.
But I think, Sophie, there is this reality. If we live in a world that is ever less stable, ever more unsafe, and the threat to the UK interest is real, and it's not just the army that I served in a decade or so ago, where that threat was faced in dusty and dangerous places half a world away. This is now a threat here in the Euro-Atlantic, a threat to our near abroad and even to our homeland. I think there is just this reality that defence, exactly as if you had shown the graphs you showed just now and showed juxtaposed against it spending on other domestic priorities like health, education, whatever else, you would have seen that defence was the priority. I suspect that the geostrategic situation demands that is the reality we have to go back to.
Look, people who know a lot more about this than me say this money is needed, right? That we're in a pre-war world, that things are getting very, very dangerous, that we need to keep this country safe. I guess my point is politicians aren't being honest about what the difficult decisions are that are going to allow us to find £75 billion more to spend on defence. I mean, thinking back to, 1948, when the welfare state was created, we were able to do that because we were winding down defence spending after the war. How are we going to get back onto a war footing, as the Prime Minister seemed to say, and perhaps you believe is necessary, while keeping public services? We can't, can we?
I think, absent any firm evidence to the contrary, I'm inclined to take the Prime Minister's brief discussion with me at face value, that he has headroom to do this. But even then, that is still an incredible choice. This is a Prime Minister choosing to eschew things that would be more politically attractive in an election year in favour of defence spending. I think that is brave, correct, but brave.
Well, he's not saying it's not that brave if he's not saying what the difficult choices are.
No. I think he is, because even if he had the money as sort of headroom, which is what he indicated to me was the case, he's still making the choice not to spend it on other things. Now, if it is the case that we're going to have to fund defence better at the expense of other public services, clearly that is painful. And there'll be plenty of people who, after 40 years of peace dividend, would not accept that that is the priority. But fundamentally, the first responsibility of any government, of any political persuasion, is the defence and security of the realm. And if we face a geopolitical environment that is worsening and the threats to the UK interest around the world and here at home are growing, then any responsible government has to respond to that, no matter how painful the decision may be, with increased investment in our defence and security.
Talk about painful decisions. You've announced you're standing down at the next election. You've quit as a minister. How are you feeling about it all? Sad, liberated?
Well, I mean, on a day like today, I would have liked to have been in the MOD. I suspect there'll be a lot of people who would feel like their work had been recognised by the Prime Minister, and it would be nice to be able to celebrate that with them. On other weekend, the previous weekend, 3-4 months ago, I'd have been reading intelligence all week. You'd have had that horrible sense of dread of what was to come, as you knew Iran was going to launch that attack. You forward positioned troops, therefore you had taken a decision to put RAF pilots in harm's way, and that may or may not have worked. And the consequence come Sunday morning could have been a regional war or worse. So I don't miss the gravity of those discussions that were the kind of routine business of the last 4 years. But I do miss working with such an amazing group of people, both the MOD, Civil Service and our nation's armed forces. What an amazing job for 4 years to be able to work with them.
OK, thank you very much indeed, James Heappey,
Thank you.
on the programme.